The air in Jerusalem hung heavy, not just with the dust of the ancient city, but with a suffocating blanket of grief and terror. 3 days had passed since the world had witnessed an unthinkable horror on a hill called Golgotha. The man they had followed, the one who spoke of kingdoms and miracles, had been crucified. His followers, a small band of bewildered souls, were scattered, their hopes shattered like brittle glass. Among them was Thomas, a man known for his earnestness, his practical mind, and perhaps a quiet skepticism that demanded tangible proof. He had loved Jesus deeply, but his love was intertwined with a need for understanding, for certainty. The crucifixion had not just broken his heart, it had fractured his very perception of reality. He had seen the nails, the spear, the lifeless form. How could anything good come from such an end? He had retreated into himself, seeking solace in solitude, perhaps questioning every word, every promise, every miracle he had ever witnessed. His grief was a heavy cloak, insulating him from the desperate whispers that had begun to circulate. It was Resurrection Sunday, though no one called it that yet. The news, when it first reached the ears of the disciples, was not a beacon of hope, but a fresh wave of confusion. Mary Magdalene, her face streaked with tears that were now mixed with an almost frantic joy, burst into their hiding place. "He is risen!" she cried, her voice hoarse with emotion. "I have seen the Lord." Her words, however, were met with a mixture of disbelief and fear. The tomb was empty, yes, but what did that mean? Grave robbers? A cruel trick? The Jewish leaders were still a palpable threat, their wrath a shadow looming over every corner of the city. The disciples, a group of 10, huddled together in a locked room in Jerusalem, the heavy wooden door barred, the windows shuttered against the hostile world outside. They were grieving, yes, but also utterly confused and paralyzed by terror. The weight of their master's death, the fear for their own lives, the crushing burden of dashed hopes. It was almost unbearable. They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting to every shadow, every creak of the old house. The air was thick with despair, a tangible presence in the small enclosed space. Then, in a moment that defied all logic and earthly understanding, he was simply there. No knock, no opening of the barred door, no sound of footsteps. One moment, the room was filled only with their collective dread. The next, a figure stood among them, radiating a gentle light that seemed to push back the shadows. It was Jesus. His first words, spoken with a tenderness that pierced through their fear, were, "Peace be with you." And in that instant, a profound calm settled over the room, a peace they had desperately yearned for, a balm for their wounded souls. He then extended his hands, revealing the raw, undeniable marks where the nails had pierced his flesh. He drew back his garment, exposing the wound in his side, a testament to the spear's cruel thrust. It was not a ghost. It was him, flesh and blood, yet transformed. The sight of his wounds, once symbols of agony, were now proof of his triumph. Their fear dissolved, replaced by an indescribable, overwhelming joy. The Master was alive. Their hearts, so recently broken, now soared with a joy that felt too vast to contain. Laughter mingled with tears, and they embraced him, their beloved teacher, returned from the grip of death. But Thomas was not there. Where he was, no one knew for certain. Perhaps he was wandering the desolate streets, lost in his own sorrow. Perhaps he was in a quiet corner, wrestling with the meaninglessness he felt. He missed that pivotal, miraculous moment, the instant when despair turned to exaltation, when doubt was swallowed by divine presence. He missed the very first breath of the resurrection, when the other disciples, their faces alight with a joy that seemed to defy the very laws of the world, finally found Thomas. They poured out their story, their words tumbling over each other in their eagerness. "We have seen the Lord," they exclaimed, their voices still trembling with awe. Imagine the scene. 10 of your closest friends, Men you had shared every meal, every journey, every secret with, all telling you the same impossible, unbelievable thing. Their eyes shone with a conviction that was almost frightening in its intensity. They spoke of his peace, his wounds, his living presence. But Thomas, his heart still encased in the ice of his grief and his mind demanding concrete evidence, could not accept it. He listened, his brow furrowed, his gaze searching their faces for any hint of delusion, any sign of collective hysteria. He had seen too much suffering, too much finality, to embrace such a fantastical claim without absolute proof. Perhaps his grief was too deep, too raw, to allow for such sudden joy. Perhaps his pragmatic nature, which had always sought to understand the world through reason and experience, simply rebelled against the miraculous. He shook his head, a gesture of profound weariness and stubborn refusal. His voice, when he spoke, was heavy with a pain that transcended mere skepticism. And then, he made the declaration that would forever etch his name into history, a statement born of both profound doubt and a desperate longing for truth. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands," he declared, his voice firm, "and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." He needed physical proof, tangible evidence that could not be denied. He would not accept second-hand testimony, no matter how fervent, no matter how many voices proclaimed it. His faith, or what was left of it, demanded an encounter, a direct experience that would leave no room for question. An entire week went by, 8 long days that stretched into an eternity for Thomas. The other disciples, transformed by their encounter, lived in the radiant joy of the resurrection. Their fear had dissipated, replaced by an unshakable certainty and a renewed sense of purpose. They spoke of him constantly, their faces glowing, their spirits lifted. For Thomas, however, these days were a torment. He walked among them, a solitary figure shrouded in his doubt, his grief, his stubborn refusal to believe. He saw their joy, felt the warmth of their renewed hope, but remained an outsider, separated by his own unyielding demand for proof. The chasm between him and his friends widened with each passing hour. He was isolated not by choice, but by the very nature of his conviction. He yearned for what they had, yet his mind refused to yield. He replayed their words, searched for inconsistencies, but found only their unwavering belief. The burden of his own declaration weighed heavily on him, a self-imposed exile from the very comfort he craved. The following Sunday, the disciples were together again, gathered in the same locked room, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of a lingering sense of caution, or perhaps in quiet anticipation. This time, Thomas was with them. He sat among them, a silent, brooding presence, his heart a battleground between a desperate hope and an entrenched disbelief. He watched his friends, their faces still reflecting the afterglow of their earlier encounter, and felt a pang of longing, a yearning to share in their certainty. Yeah, his mind remained unconvinced, his resolve unbroken. And then, just as before, in the same impossible, miraculous way, Jesus appeared in their midst. The heavy door remained barred, the windows sealed, yet he stood there, radiating the same profound peace. His gaze swept over the room, acknowledging each disciple. And then, with an intentionality that took Thomas's breath away, he turned. He walked directly to Thomas, his eyes filled not with condemnation, but with an infinite understanding, a gentle compassion that seemed to penetrate Thomas's very soul. It was as if he had overheard every word of the conversation from a week ago, as if he had known the exact depths of Thomas's struggle, the precise nature of his desperate demand. Jesus looked into the eyes of his stubborn, questioning friend and offered him exactly what Thomas had demanded, what he had so vehemently insisted upon. "Thomas," he said, his voice soft yet firm, carrying the weight of eternity, "put your finger here. See my hands." He extended his hands, the wounds still visible, still raw, yet now transformed into symbols of victory. "Reach out your hand and put it into my side," He offered his scars, not as a display of suffering, but as proof of his love, as tangible evidence of his triumph over death. It was an invitation, a gentle, profound act of grace, meeting Thomas precisely where his doubt lay. And then, with a tenderness that belied the power of his words, he gave Thomas a gentle command, a loving challenge. Stop doubting and believe. The Bible does not explicitly state whether Thomas actually touched the wounds, whether his fingers traced the nail marks or his hand entered the spear wound. Many believe he didn't need to. The sheer presence of Jesus, his knowing gaze, his willingness to meet Thomas in his deepest skepticism was proof enough. The love standing before him, the understanding that permeated the room, shattered the walls of his doubt more effectively than any physical sensation ever could. Thomas fell to his knees, his body trembling, his spirit overwhelmed. The carefully constructed fortress of his disbelief crumbled in an instant, replaced by an avalanche of recognition, of profound, unshakable faith. His doubt had not led him to unbelief. It had, paradoxically, led him to the greatest, most profound confession of faith. He looked up at Jesus, tears streaming down his face, and uttered words that no one else had dared to speak, words that echoed through the ages, "My Lord and my God." He was the first among them to call Jesus God directly, a declaration born not of blind faith, but of a journey through the crucible of doubt. Jesus looked at him with a love that transcended human understanding. "Because you have seen me, you have believed?" Jesus asked, his voice filled with a gentle wisdom. And then he spoke a blessing, a profound truth that resonated not just for Thomas, but for all generations to come, for every soul who would seek him across the vast expanse of time and space. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Jesus did not condemn Thomas for his doubt. He did not chastise him for his skepticism. Instead, he met Thomas in his doubt, in the very heart of his questioning. He was patient with his unbelief, understanding the human need for certainty, the struggle of a mind grappling with the miraculous. He stooped down, metaphorically and literally, to meet Thomas right where he was, in his moment of deepest need. This, then, is not merely the story of doubting Thomas. It is, more profoundly, the story of patient Jesus. It is a testament to a God who understands our questions, who does not shy away from our skepticism, but who embraces it with unwavering love. It is a story about a God who, in his infinite mercy, shows us his scars not just as proof of his identity, but as the ultimate proof of his enduring, sacrificial love, a love that heals, transforms, and ultimately leads us to belief.